This is Vibe Science, a top 100 wellness podcast presented by the Radcast Network, breaking wellness barriers and making health truly personal. Here are your hosts, Ryan Alford and Chris Hansen.
You can't change the date you were born, but your body really can be 10 or 20 years younger by a variety of measures. And I'm a leader in the longevity field. And I'll tell you, if you have a business doing north of $1 million a year and you're not spending at least $25,000 a year on being younger, it's because you're bad at math. And even if you think it only has a 50% chance of working, you're still crazy for not doing it. Because imagine this. You get another 20 years of lifespan, compound interest for another 20 years. You know what that's going to do for you? Just that alone.
Yeah.
Right. And on top of that, without even looking at, compound interest and the things like that, it's the quality of life, the energy you have for all that time. That's worth it. Because if you want to be able to, be a mom or a dad, you want to be able to be present for your kids and your community and your family. And you want to be able to just do the things that matter in your life. And if you're tired all the time and your body hurts, it sucks. And you're going to yell at your kids and you're going to fire someone who doesn't need firing, or you're going to, be mean to a partner. It's not necessary. And that's why longevity matters, because you get more now and you're probably going to get a lot more later. But even if you don't, you'll be glad you did it. I've spent 20% of my income since my mid-20s working on that.
Yeah, because you don't want to live long. You want to live long well. I don't want to be 90 years old just to be 90. I want to be 90 years old and doing, pretty much what I want to be able to do. And if you make all that, that's what I understand about, and most CEOs, I think, have caught on to this, the successful ones. Like, you're making all this money and you to provide for your family and to have time and freedom and do all these things, but you aren't going to be around to enjoy the benefits of that, the time benefits, all that, if you aren't taking care of yourself.
Staying strong, fueling your body with good food and getting good quality sleep is the foundation for all of this. And the only reason why I preface this first is because I can give you, the stuff out there anecdotally, there's anecdotal evidence, meaning that it's through personal experience, and you're seeing a lot of results through individual clients, but there's not these rigorous studies. Randomized controlled trials have been funded to actually prove that it works. Some of these experimental agents like peptides, we can do some of those things, right? And I don't have a problem prescribing some of those things, just as long as you know that it's anecdotal evidence. We don't have all the literature that supports that it will or won't work in you specifically. But I'm going to have a hard time working with someone who's getting 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. They're saying that their chief complaint is, my energy is low. Well, yeah, your energy's low because you've got crappy sleep, man. And I've got all this extra weight. You're sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night of sleep. And we know that sends signals to your brain to eat crappier food, more junk food. Your insulin sensitivity drops. You're not exercising regularly. All the things that you need to do to move the needle in the right direction. I can give you the latest scientific potion that's out there, but it's not really going to move the needle like this other stuff. And the one caveat though, with this is, so we talk about lifestyle optimization, and then moving on from that, I think really the icing on the cake is hormone optimization. So there's only so much that you can do. You can dial everything in from a lifestyle perspective. And then there are other things that, unfortunately, a lot of it is through genetics that, and as we age, our hormones tend to slip. Women obviously much more reliable because they have a hormonal clock that stops menopause, and their estrogen and progesterone drop completely. And we know with them that, it's time to supplement, to refurbish what we've lost. But with men, it's a little bit more of a slippery slope because It tends to drop. Testosterone tends to drop as we age. So when is the right time to consider, agents to replenish that? It highly depends on the individual and based on their symptoms, not necessarily a specific point in time in their life.
Well, it's not that hard to get the body you want. Now, I say this as a guy who struggled greatly as a 300-pound entrepreneur. But the reason I couldn't get the body I wanted is because I had to pay rent, and I had to do my career and all the other stuff that's going on. But if you really wanted to do this, you stop everything and you have an unlimited amount of money and you hire all the experts, right? And you just focus for 8 or 10 hours a day on getting the body you want. That's what they do in Hollywood, right?
Yep.
And suddenly you can look like Wolverine. Well, problem is that doesn't work for you and me because we have kids, we have families, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, we have communities. So we're always stuck between this. Well, how hard could it be? Well, in the amount of time and energy that we have, it's actually not possible for a lot of people without the right tools and advice. So for me, I exercise, you're going to hate me on this, 20 minutes a week right now. And I'm 7% body fat. I'm just absolutely stupidly ripped. And I've never looked this good in my life. And that's because of the most recent book and Upgrade Labs. My exercise is done with AI. It's done with these techniques that give sometimes 90% better results than you going to the gym. So same thing. So I'm trying to sell. So I knock on all my neighbors' doors, and you got the guy next to you. It's like, I just ran an ad campaign and I did SEO. And one of you is driving the Maserati and the other one isn't. So I think you should do that for your exercise. You should do that for your nutrition and everything else. And suddenly the energy you get back goes into you, and then you can use that as an entrepreneur. Because it didn't teach me that at Wharton. I made fun of Ivy Leagues earlier. I have a Wharton MBA, which is not where you go to learn how to be an entrepreneur. But they never taught you that. Your company, it's a reflection of your energy. So if your cells are making energy right, you've done your personal development work. So first you can make electricity, then you can direct it where you want it to go. Your company is generally going to look pretty good. Your culture is going to be okay. And when your energy's off, your company's energy is off. They're mirrors of each other. And when you understand that, that's why you take care of your hardware. That's why you do whatever kind of meditation or neurofeedback or whatever practice you have for managing yourself. Because you get those done, the company just follows. You've seen the same thing in your life?
Oh God, 100%. It's like when it's a direct reflection. Like when I look in the mirror, I'm just not, when the wires are crossed, it's like a bad, it's like having to reboot the computer, like it's not working. It's like, I got to reboot, you got to get it going. If it's not, because it's direct reflection. Talking with Dave Asprey, founder of Bulletproof Coffee, which we're going to talk about here shortly. But Dave, I think people, one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask you, or believe it or not, like, what's a bad day for Dave Asprey? Like what I think, and you've told us a little bit what drives you, but I think for people that think, oh, okay, he's the father of biohacking, he's always like hacking everything. Like, but what's a bad day? What's a cheat for Dave Asprey? All
right. There's two kinds of bad days. There's internal bad days and there's external bad days. So an internal bad day is you wake up and like you don't feel right. You're groggy, and maybe your back hurts. And for me, this was just all of my days when I was younger until I got my biology under control. And then your brain just won't go. You kind of put the accelerator down and the car doesn't move. So you push all the way to the floor and it's kind of moving. If there's no more pushing you can do, right? So then you can't remember things. And you just get that there's like a feeling, you could call it anxiety, but it's not like worry. It's just like your body is not right. And for me, that's usually caused by eating stuff that's not compatible with my biology. Or I slept in a hotel room that was full of, artificial fragrances or worse, toxic mold. It's amazing. Like I'm heading to a hotel that I know is full of mold. Every time I sleep there for 2 nights, I just feel like garbage the next day. So I'm actually shipping.
Stay somewhere else.
Well, no, I tried. There's nowhere nearby to stay.
Oh.
So I looked at it, but I'm sending myself a $500 air filter. so that I know I'll wake up and I won't have that day, and then I'll send it back to my house when I'm done. It's whatever.
I just envisioning Dave Asprey like spending an hour like attaching air filter somewhere.
You just plug it in.
Oh,
but it's one of those things where I just don't want to feel that way, because that's kind of a wasted day. And with all the nootropics and biohacks, I can take myself back from most of those days pretty easily. Like I know the levers and knobs say, all right, I'm going to show up today, and it doesn't matter what happened there. I can make it work, but it just might take more effort than it's supposed to. Like you want to feel like you're kind of like you're skating, like there's some glide in there, versus if you just putting on crampons and walking up an ice cliff, right? Like I want the skating sensation of the day. So that's, I guess, you're in the South. You've probably never even seen an ice cliff, but you know what I'm talking about. Up in Canada,
I've traveled to one, but I have definitely not seen them here. We do have 4 seasons in the upstate, but very little ice cliffs.
So if that's an internal bad day, right? Yeah. What's an external bad day? Well, try, getting fired by your board of directors from the company you founded. Try getting divorced, try, moving to a new city. Those are all on the WHO list of stressors. Oh, wait. I used to say that like it had credibility, the WHO list of stressors.
Oh, shit. Yes.
No, never mind. Screw you guys. You have no credibility anymore.
0.
So anyway, it's on a major list of stressors of humans. And so what's going on there is how you handle external stress and things like that. That's a function of how do you see reality in your head? And do you have the electrical capacity in your cells to handle it? So most entrepreneurs and most humans fail because we suck at making electricity because we broke ourselves. So once you fix that, you can still be dysfunctional, because what's happening next is how you see the world is dysfunctional. And for me, I had all of this wrong with me. And at this point, I've had about 1,500 entrepreneurs come through my neuroscience company. It's called 40 Years of Zen. And I built it for my own brain. So I've got a neuroscientist. We've got 7 patents in different types of tech that improve your brain function. So you sit there for a week, and it's the equivalent of meditating for 20, 30, 40 years. And at the end of this, I've rewritten my operating system so that things that would have been overwhelming are manageable. So you learn how to tune it. So all of a sudden, more power, less waste on ineffective views of the world. And then you can handle an enormous amount. An enormous amount. It doesn't mean you want to. It means you can. So the capacity for hard work is something that I greatly value. My willingness to work hard is something I greatly value. If I have to work hard all the time, it means I suck at managing my life.
Unfortunately, a lot of what you see on social media is very dangerous, and not at fault for the viewer, because a lot of people are extremely charismatic, articulate, even have credentials, but they're not following what the consensus, the broad evidence shows. They have, theories, and they base their views on theories, and they don't follow the full body of evidence. Because I'll give you an example. You can say something, and I'm going to come out with this. I'm going to be talking about seed oils soon. You can say that, for example, that seed oils cause inflammation and oxidation and all of these bad things, and you can find many individual studies that support that seed oils may not be good for you. But when you look at the whole body of evidence, which way does the whole body of evidence show, looking at really good, high quality studies? And when I say studies, I mean randomized control trials and meta-analyses, which are essentially like a summary of a bunch of randomized control trials or observational trials put together. And if they put out this expert review, what does the whole body of evidence show? Not one cherry-picked study or a couple. Seed oils really aren't bad for you. In the main context, and everything gets kind of blown out of proportion, and you have to put it into context. And of course, seed oils are ubiquitous in a bunch of crappy processed foods, and we eat a lot of it. But seed oils themselves aren't necessarily the culprit. It's the fact that you have a really crappy diet. So that's just one example, and not to the fault for the viewer, but you listen to someone that has a narrative and a belief, and you follow that because it kind of fits your views and your ideology of the way it makes sense to you. Of course, logically it makes sense, but science doesn't care about feelings. Science cares about what evidence shows. So the way that I handle this situation is I kind of take a combination approach. I look at what guidelines show. I look what the reproducible data shows. I use that as my guide. I don't go far off into left field on some theory that makes sense. And then I look at the individual patient. Do you fit what the guideline shows or not? Because guidelines are guidelines. Okay. It's not meant for the individual. It's meant for a mass of people. So when it comes to that, I think people need to understand that not everything is so black and white. Things are very nuanced, and there are exceptions to so many rules. You can't only look at one side of the story. And oftentimes, if you're seeing really opposing views about things, probably there's a lot of combination in between the two, and it's a lot more nuanced than this is right or this is right. It's the way that you're evaluating and looking at the data. And people that really are experienced and know certain fields very well use certain language that talk about things, and you see the way they talk. They're not extreme. They don't say this is the way that it is. It's much softer language because there's always caveats to this situation. So a lot of this stuff blends together, and the more knowledgeable you are, you understand the nuances. I don't know that really helps, the mainstay viewer looking at things, but I would say this. And I don't know if you guys follow Lane Norton, BioLane. He does a really good job of explaining this. Even if you don't look at the data that's out there, because it's hard to do. I mean, it took me many years to learn scientific method, to dissect studies, to see, what's a good study, what's a bad study. You could very easily just learn, the process, the hierarchy of how research goes. Like, the best evidence is a meta-analysis. A randomized control trial is the holy grail. Then you have other stuff like observational stuff, which is good, but it's not as good as a randomized control trials because it accounts for, a bunch of, it can prove causation, as opposed to observation cannot prove causation. It's just an observation. And there are a lot of other confounding events that could skew the data, but it's still good data. But where I'm going with this is, when you watch someone speak on social media and they have very extreme language, then oftentimes they're not an expert in the field, and you have to raise a red flag. Someone that is a lot softer with their language, not using extreme, like this is the way that it is, this is wrong. Like extreme language is a red flag when it comes to science, because there's always exceptions to the rule. So whoever you watch, I would watch to see, do they use those extreme statements? And if they are, I would push back a little bit and maybe start watching somebody else on similar topics to see how their language is.
Sometimes it can be a little bit of a gamble. If we're in our younger years, I'm going to say 30 is our younger years. Starting these nutritional kind of ingredients can be really helpful as almost like a gamble to help us age more gracefully. Oh, have you, I wonder if your listeners have heard the term longevity vitamin.
Probably.
Versus a regular. Yeah, because a regular vitamin, if we're deficient in vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin K, vitamin D, vitamin E, we feel the effects almost immediately if we're really truly deficient. But with longevity vitamins that we could consider, like maybe fisetin, even ergothioneine that we'll talk about has been named a longevity vitamin in the research, that if we're deficient in these, we may not necessarily feel the health impacts immediately, but we tend to age faster. So it can be a gamble. But here's another piece of the puzzle. Fisetin also inhibits inflammation. So it does so on certain cytokines like interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, interleukin 8, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, which are really inflammatory cytokines. So if somebody is having inflammatory issues, they might experience less of those types of symptoms with Visatin. But for those who are maybe not 30, maybe they're in their 60s or 70s, and they're bringing on these nutrients that they haven't brought on in the past, what I would encourage people to do is maybe monitor their health through biomarkers with their doctor, like running even just a simple chemistry panel, looking at like liver function, kidney function. Those might be, or even insulin sensitivity, looking at like hemoglobin A1C and insulin levels. That might be a good way of monitoring to see if the body is, kind of getting a little bit more in balance by cleaning out these unwanted zombie cells.
People are starting to find out more about it and kind of becoming more familiar with Wegovy and tirzepatide and semaglutides. So those are kind of a lot of the big main weight loss, the GLP-1s they're called, those kind of curb the hunger. Tirzepatide is a double antagonist, so that one kind of curbs hunger, but then also helps from a metabolic standpoint somewhat. And then you have other ones that are coming out that are in trials like retatrutide, which is a triple antagonist. And then they're working on quad antagonists as well. And what those do, besides the weight loss and the metabolic and all that, they also help so you don't have muscle loss. So a lot of people, and that was kind of the biggest problem when doctors are going out and just prescribing the GLP-1s, the semaglutides and Wegovys and all that to everybody. They're not giving them a program to actually follow. You got to work out, you got to lift, you got to also eat protein. And they're not telling them, like, if you're not, you got to get a gram of protein per body pound if you're on a GLP-1. Like, if not, you will lose muscle. And it's just, that's just what happens. But if you do it right and you have a process and a program that you follow from people that are actually informed, not just a doctor that might want to prescribe you something. And there actually can be super beneficial. Another big popular one is BP157. People heard the rage on that, like, injuries, you injure your shoulder. A good friend of mine in our Krav Maga class ended up tearing supraspinatus or something on back here on his shoulder, and was going to have to go in and have surgery. I was like, get some BP127, TB500, and a couple other things. And he started doing injections right there by it. Went in to go have the surgery, and it literally went from, like, I don't know, let's just call it like a millimeter down to like a quarter of a millimeter or something.
Wow.
But I mean, it healed up that much in 8 weeks, because that was how long before he could even get in to get surgery and stuff. And, so they went in and just ended up cleaning it out and everything, the area around it and all. But I mean, there's a huge potential with what peptides and everything can bring, to somebody right now these days. And the market's growing with amazing new, opportunities of products out there. I know we were talking real quick before we jumped on and stuff. And there's a new one called Sloop, SLU PP332. And it's a compound. It mimics, the benefits of exercise, technically without needing physical activity. But you got to get out and still got to work out. I mean, but it'll increase the level of what you're doing when you're working out. But just like in the University of Florida just did a huge study recently in the last 12 months. And the obese mice lost 12% of their body weight. Endurance increased. They could run 70% longer and 45%, further. So there's some really cool stuff that's, coming down the pipe, overall.
There's no point in putting something not quality into our body, especially if we're trying to promote like longevity. So it all really actually starts with our formulators, our formulation scientists. What they're primarily doing is they're looking at the latest and greatest in research. So every single formula, life extension, creates is based on that scientific research. So we're using the same dose and the exact same ingredient that gave the best benefits. And we were looking specifically at a specific kind of health concern when we're formulating. But once they have the recipe together, then we search for the highest quality raw material from around the world. Because, like, for example, we want to grab like plant-based material from the, typically the native areas that those plants are grown. Like, for example, we want to get our ashwagandha from India, or, that kind of. Yep. So we search around, but the caveat is testing, like you said. All of our raw material is tested by a third party to ensure that quality, that purity, that potency. And then once we have a really good batch. Oh, another thing is that we do that DNA fingerprinting testing too of our plant material, just to make sure. Because, sometimes if you get a big bag of like powdered green material that says this is, green tea, we want to make sure it's actually green tea and not something else. Yep. And that it's not adulterated with some other, plant material. So we do all that type of testing. And then once we have that raw material and we put it into, like, for example, a pill, a capsule, a tablet, a powder, then we test again to make sure that there wasn't any contaminants, that the purity and potency is still there. And we will offer a certificate of analysis, which we call a C of A or COA. And that's the final product testing. So a lot goes into creating a product like that. And then even with like good manufacturing practices, Life Extension is NSF certified. So that's a third party organization that comes in and makes sure that, companies like Life Extension are abiding by the good manufacturing practices. They'll do audits on the manufacturing facilities to make sure that we're up to snuff. So yeah, lots goes into it.
Any tips, tricks, things, not tricks as much as just, I don't know, creating good habits.
Yeah. No, it's, and a lot of times you don't even really need any of that stuff. You getting up every morning, getting outside first thing and just looking at the sun, getting the sun in your eyes, is huge. That could set you up for energy for your day, just clarity, things like that. Going through breathing exercises and stuff is super easy to do. You can download the Wim Hof app on your phone, go through here and follow it for 4 minutes. It's super short, and come out with tons of energy overall. I love the cold plunge. I've been cold plunging forever. So I go down we have one in our basement, go down 37 degrees. I jump in for about 4 to 5 minutes. And so that's a good energy boost. And then infrared sauna is always amazing to help 25 to 40 minutes, every, 4 or 5 times a week is great as well too. So, and then exercise, really making sure you're exercising, you're getting, as you get older, we want to make sure we're getting enough cardio in. From that standpoint, also lifting over the years. I used to do CrossFit. I used to own CrossFits. I still do it every not as much. It's always a little bit harder on the joints as you get up in age, but figuring out which type of strength routine is going to work best to encourage muscle development and growth and things like that for you as you get older is huge. And then, it all comes down to what we put in our bodies. With all the crap and stuff and the horrible pesticides. And I just read about a study the other day. They took these non-organic strawberries, put them in a juicer, took the juice, measured the level of glyphosate. Glyphosate, there we go, in there. And it was 10 times greater than the initial amount that they sprayed. They were able to take the juice, go back and spray the same plants again and that's what people are eating. And that's the non-organic. So, if you're out at dinner or wherever, and that's why men's testosterone levels are down like significantly. People now that are in their 20s have a testosterone level of 200 to 300. Whereas I mean, like I said, I'm 51. So, I mean, normal used to be 1,500. So, when I was in my 20s. So, we have to try to make sure we're eating right, we're detoxing, we're staying healthy, and optimizing what we do. And then all this other stuff we can add will even make it better. It'll for us overall. So.
The content discussed on this show is provided for reference and educational purposes. The content is not an attempt to practice medicine or provide specific medical advice. Always consult your personal physician for medical advice and proper diagnosis.
Thanks for listening. This is Vibe Science. To learn more or watch full episodes, visit vibesciencepodcast.com. Here's to discovering your highest vibe